Welcome to my site, everybody. My name is Paul Smyers. I'm a practicing real estate agent in the beautiful state of Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. I specialize in rural property, and I get calls and emails from people who are looking to come into this area from outside of the area, maybe even from another part of Virginia. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how can you find the kind of property you need for homesteading and recreation in the state of Virginia. Now, I haven't traveled on every single road in Virginia, but I have a general overview of the entire state and the area that I live in. I've driven around a lot of roads. I do a lot of scouting. So let's discuss a little bit with my visual aid here. First of all, as you see on the East Coast here, I don't really cover this area, but in that area it's a lot more congested. There's Route 95 that goes up there, and a lot of the communities and all are related to the water and the ocean and the beaches and the rivers and so on. So I don't really do much over there. This yellow area here is called the Piedmont, which means basically the foothills. And this area here actually has a lot of farmland, and it varies somewhat because there's some pretty decent sized cities in there. Richmond, Charlottesville, Lynchburg, and so on. And there's the usual stuff around those cities, although they're not really huge cities. Charlottesville is a lot more congested than Lynchburg, for example. But the Piedmont, you'll find some interesting terrain there. They do a lot of timber harvesting. There's a lot of large farms and some big crops and so on. And it varies considerably. I personally don't like the timber harvesting area because mostly it's pine, and the pine needle soil is really not that good. And also some of the rivers you can see here, there's some really big rivers that flow down in Virginia. And some of them now and then they have a really big flood. So you got to kind of not buy land that's right near one of those big rivers, even though it might be 100 yards from where the river is now. In the years that you own a property, you might have to consider something that is a rather large piece of, a lot of flooding. So I live over in this general area up here. And as you can see in the western mountains, it starts to get a little higher in terrain and everything. And all the way down here in Virginia, this valley goes all the way down here to North Carolina. But basically, this whole area here in the yellow, and this is the Blue Ridge Parkway, and the Blue Ridge Hills go down this way. So the Shenandoah Valley, the actual river flows up here, and then there's another river that comes out of West Virginia and goes up here. So that is a very beautiful area. All of this land up here is just gorgeous. Now, down in the southwest part of the state, especially in this area here, you get some pretty rugged areas. I joke about it a little bit sometimes, and I say, well, that's where the Bigfoots are. But basically, there's some areas that are quite steep and rather not hospitable for your farming type of activity, but they are really good for recreation, hunting, fishing, and so on. Now, Virginia has lots and lots of water. There's Smithbound Lake here, Lake Anna up here, and then there's a couple of big lakes down here in the North Carolina border. Now, they are man-made lakes with dams, but there's all kinds of fishing and everything. So Smithbound Lake in particular, that's where my broker is located, down in here. And this whole area here is just absolutely beautiful. Rolling, it's a little higher than the Piedmont. Starts to get into the Blue Ridge Mountains here, and you have a lot of streams running off and little valleys and beautiful scenery and a lot of views. So that's a little bit about the overall area in Virginia. Now, when you go look for land in general, or a place to build a house or a homestead, there's a lot of particular things that you might want besides the general wide area of the location, like I said on that map. You also want it's good to have a variety of terrain. For example, if you buy a property that it could be like 20 acres for a good price, but if most of it is a 35-degree angle or 40-degree angle and it's loaded with trees and hardwoods and really hard to harvest, and yeah, some people do like to live that way, but most of the time that kind of land is not amenable to a farming type of activity or domestic animals or something like that. However, if you want it for recreation land, and if you really like living tucked back in there and private up in the hills, or you can find that type of place in Virginia as well, because there's a lot of mountains, as you see. So, looking for farmland, a lot of people ask me questions that they're looking for something, but it's really kind of outside my physical area where I can actually realistically deal with. For example, I live down here, and Winchester's way up here. I can service realistically within a couple hours of me, but in rural areas, you can drive a lot of miles just looking at 2 or 3 properties. So what I'm trying to help people with is before you contact the realtor, get an idea of really what you want and kind of narrow it down a little bit so that you can understand that there are some places in Virginia that I would just suggest, depending on what you want, if you want to, like, say, farmland, or you want to have domestic animals or solar energy, I wouldn't recommend going way up on some of these hills where all the steep angles and odd sunshine angles, and you don't really get the shade, the sunshine that you might want for, say, like crops and solar energy. On the other hand, there are large areas, open area, like the beautiful Shenandoah Valley here, that is just beautiful. Now, this is Charlottesville over here on this map here, and this area here is also very beautiful. It starts to get a little bit more busy because there's a little more people on this side of the Blue Ridge Hills. We start to get into terrain. Some of these mountains are 3,500, 3,000 feet. You start getting up here, they're up in the 4,000 feet. We have, like where I live, is down here, I'm at 1,500 feet. So we have a lot of places that you can be in a beautiful hills, like west of Stanton in this area. You can be at 2,000 feet and still be having a beautiful view over the valley. So when you start looking for your property that you're going to homestead, again, think about the types of elements that you want and the type of land use that you're going to have. You need the right kind of zoning, and fortunately in Virginia, we have a lot of really pretty liberal zoning. You don't want to abuse the privilege. There are people who would park like 30 cars on a piece of property, they just leave it, and who is going to buy that, because so on the other hand, you have some liberal use of your land because for a long time in the history of Virginia, there has been the tendency, it's an agricultural state. We need that. We need the farmers and all the people with animals and chickens and geese and everything like that. Well, maybe not so much geese, but goats maybe. So again, when you contact a realtor, find somebody who really wants to deal with rural property, because honestly, there are realtors that are specialized in certain areas, like commercial real estate or high-end fancy homes and so on. I chose deliberately to focus on the rural area because I love that kind of lifestyle. I've traveled plenty in my life and seen plenty of big cities, and that's the reason I live in a rural area, because it's so much more enjoyable in a lot of ways. Now, feel free to contact me. If you want to contact me, you can find a couple of videos I have on this site about the contact. I throw up my card. You can watch the video, and you can take a screenshot, and you'll see my business phone number and my email. And, I'm a public person because of the real estate business. We have to be out there in the public, so and not too difficult to find. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate it. I get a lot of other videos out here. I'm going to keep adding to the content this year and try to discuss in little small portions the little details involved in buying and selling country land. And if you're a seller, if you have something that's inherited or you're going to pass on a homestead, please, I would love to have a chance to sell your property, because I look for those kind of buyers. They contact me, and if I get people who allow me to sell their house for them, I'll represent them. And I'm very proud of the rural life, and I know a lot about it. There's all kinds of stuff you need to know if you live in the country about the type of terrain, the water, the septic systems, the wells, and all that kind of stuff. So again, thanks for watching, and please watch some of my other videos and like and share if you enjoy the content. Thanks again.